Hello and well met. This is Layman with the Fantasy Grounds Academy. Today I'm going to be looking at trolls and setting up an encounter, but also adding some more ambiance, some atmosphere, things that will make the encounter more memorable, more, I guess, better looking, or maybe even more complicated. So it kind of depends on your familiarity with the platform, what your resources are, and how much time you have. So those are the things you have to consider if you want to go out of your way to make your encounters more memorable. So we're going to touch on sound. I'm going to touch on some things that you can do in Fantasy Grounds. And then also I'm going to possibly add a soundtrack type thing where I've made a AI-produced sound, which is a song that is basically about trolls. So this whole thing is going to be centered around a troll encounter that happens in a swamp. So I want to make it kind of memorable. So I'm going to have two trolls, and looking that up online and in Fantasy Grounds, it's between a CR5 and a CR8 challenge rating. So I'd want at least 4 or 5 players at level 5 to balance the encounter out, or maybe 4 players at level 6, something like that. But essentially, this is a tough encounter. What helps, though, is there's only 2 trolls, but since they regenerate, and they're, pretty immune to a lot of things except for fire, this can be a very, very tough encounter. And I kind of want it to be savage. I don't want it to be just a skip, jump in the park. And hopefully somebody in the party either has a torch or a fireball or something. So I will not give the players that opportunity unless they themselves come up with it, meaning that they may remember that torches or fire would affect the goblin or the trolls from regenerating. So that's something that you'll have to decide as a game master if that's important or not to your encounter. So I made myself a little crib sheet. So what this is kind of like a cheat list of all the different things I was working on. So there's audio, there's maps, there's all kinds of stuff, and encounters. So first I'm going to bring up this NPC troll. So this is the base troll that I use. This came out of the core rules. And if you click on this, this already has a full body image, the camera image, and a flat token. So that's why I chose to use this, because if I do my own, I got to make all that stuff myself. So I just went ahead and used the stock encounter monster. So this would be the troll. Now this map here is part of a set that I purchased from Game Tile Warehouse, or Chris Map Hatter. He doesn't have the website anymore, but this is also on the Meanders packs on the Fantasy Grounds store. So if you're wondering where this map came from, I believe it's still available on the store. It doesn't have line of sight, but in this case, for this particular map, being that it's outdoors in the wilderness, all I did to it is I'm going to unlock it first. And I want to show you the details of this. So if I go into this here, which is the line of sight, that's all I did to it. I added a couple tree stumps here, and that's it. Nothing else. And then if you want to make this a little bit more interesting and less static, you can add some assets to this to kind of make it more interesting. So what I'm going to do is, this is assuming that you have assets that you're importing yourself, or you have the Fantasy Grounds art subscription. So I wanted to kind of be upfront about that. So there's the map. It's locked right now. I'm going to unlock it. And then what I want to do is find some assets that I might want to use to add to this map. I'm already going to add some darkness to it, so that'll be something that you'll have to decide as a game master. So it's going to be dark. Hopefully some of the 1 or 2 of the party members will have dark vision or a torch. And we're going to talk about the torch thing because that's an important aspect of lighting and such. So we'll get into that as well. So basically the line of sight on here is nothing big. And all I'm going to be doing now is going to assets. And I did generate some images from from art, or some kind of this is AI generative tool. I didn't make this art, but this is something I imported into Fantasy Grounds. So you might use this to pin to your map here so that you can show that to your players at a later time. So I might put this here, and I might link this, or there's this one, and there's this other one right here. So I don't know which one would go better with this scene. I'm probably going to go with this one, but there's only 2 trolls, so I'm going to probably just stick with this one. And that's basically what I'm going to be using to kind of enhance the encounter. So if I go to images, I'm going to pull up Trolls 1. This is the image that I'm going to share with the players. So once the encounter starts, I'll probably show this image. And I've added a little bit of mist or fog. I don't know if that comes through in the stream. Let me see if I can. Yeah, that doesn't help that much. But it basically, there's some fog there that's going to go across the screen. So when you're looking at this image, it's not so static. It kind of has a little bit of movement to it. So you can do stuff like this to kind of enhance the images that you share. And then, of course, when you're done, once you right-click on an image that you've shared, so if I go to sharing and I share the record, the players can see that. They can if they save it, they can recall it whenever they want. However, when you're done, if you're no longer going to need this image, it could be a map or whatever, you right-click on it, go to sharing, and then you just stop sharing the record. So what that does is potentially frees up resources, memory, that sort of thing. So if you're getting a lot of lag halfway through your campaign, take a look at your extensions and how many images you're sharing and how large the images are. So that's another big factor. So let me get off this Zoom thing here. Okay, so then anyways, that's an image that I would probably share with my players. So I'll link that image to this map. And that just makes it more convenient for me to get to it when it's time. So I'm just going to drag and drop this record up here. So let me put my pointer tool back on so you can see kind of see what I'm looking at. And I'm going to take this link up here, the top left corner, left click, hold the mouse button, and drag it. So you just take this, drag the record, drop it on the map. So now that is part of this scene or this particular map, or in this case, this is an encounter. So now I'm going to size these up to where I want them to go. And then when I share this with the players, this record, that's what they're going to see, basically. And then I can right-click and go to View and Zoom to Fill to kind of recenter it. And that's basically what I would share with the players after the encounter starts, or maybe in the middle of it. Just depends. So another thing you may want to add to this is, what if you wanted to trigger some audio, right? So that's another thing that you may or may not need, depending on what your subscription level is like for Syrinscape, or maybe you have custom audio, whatever it may be. So I'm going to talk about that, and we'll get into the Syrinscape part of this. So quite often, I see that initially when you set this up, you have to have Syrinscape, the modules open. So if I go into modules, I have the basics, the triggers basically for the NPCs. So this is for the monster manual, so that will take care of the monster sounds. And then I also have the Syrinscape sounds for weapons and spells for the players. So that's kind of your basics there. And those trigger off of the chat. So whenever that wording comes up or whatever that's associated with a spell or a weapon or some sort of attack, it'll trigger an audio sound that will bounce out to your players or to yourself. But if you want to customize this and you don't have one of the Smiteworks official conversions for the sound links, you can make your own link. So I'm going to associate a link to this image. So when I share it, some kind of these trolls type context menu comes up. So this is part of the subscription that you're having or that you're going to get with Syrinscape. So even if you don't have these packs, as long as you have the settings right in the sound and you have your way to kind of associate your own links and story entries with the content that you want to display, That's the way to do it. So if I come over to up here in the sound sets, I have a new group that I made called Custom Audio Triggers. So I'm going to be working on that. And what this is going to do is allow for me to add my own customization for audio. And that's going to be just for this encounter. So what I'm going to do is first bring up Syrinscape and the actual, the volume. So these are all NPC trolls right now. And the reason that's here is because I have the NPC record open. So that has to do with the context menu that's coming from the Monster Manual module. So if you have this open, it'll bring these sounds up in the context menus where you're going to interface this if you want to manually trigger stuff. And then you can also use this as a quick reference if you need to when it comes to triggering audio. Now, it's not going to happen automatically, but you're going to have these ready to go when these trolls are up in your combat tracker, or you have it up here in the context menu. So if I close this, it'll probably close or shut down most of these context menus. So let's test that out. So if I close this troll, then it should close the context menu as well, which is these elements. So I want to bookmark this troll just in case. And then I will close that, and then as you can see, it gets rid of the context menu. So now that I'm not accessing that record anymore, that's not going to come up. However, you may want to, and that's based off of the modules that's already set up for Fantasy Grounds. So that is this, that's these modules here. So those happen automatically because I have them loaded, and I have a subscription to the Syrinscape account. So these are the two modules. So this is for the NPCs and monsters, and it's for the players. Now, you don't have to have those loaded, but if you want it to automatically pop up in this context menu whenever you access that record type or something associated with it, it'll bring that up, even if you don't use it. So what I'm going to do now is actually find something that I want to use for this image. So I'm going to go to Settings. And here's the context menu. Now, this is assuming that you've already set this up. And I'm not going to go into the complete setup, but there's a couple things that is very important that I see people do all the time. So when you have a web session player, the URL, once you generate that and then you generate the invite, don't do it again. So in other words, write it down or take the links and place them somewhere. So if your players lose the link, or if you yourself forget which session you're in, then you will have that ready. Because I think what some people are doing is they'll forget, or the chat window no longer has the link. So when they pull that up, they're trying to create a new session and a new invite, and that's not really going to work too well, because it might create a whole separate session, and then your players might still be using the old link instead of the current one. So you want to just generate the session ID and the invite one time. Once you do that, there'll be two links in the chat, and all you have to do is drag those over and put them in one of your notes or something, or you bookmark them if you have to in your browser. Once you do that, you shouldn't have to mess with it too much more. And then when you want to manage your sounds or do anything like searches, you want to make sure that you have already got everything set up, and you do it through this menu. If you do that type of work through the Fantasy Player online for Syrinscape, it can get really confusing. The only time you really need to use their portal for the GM side of things is if you need to build your own custom sound sets in Syrinscape. Otherwise, do everything in this Fantasy Grounds setting window. I mean, it's not as fancy looking, but it does the same thing. It has a search here. So I did a search for trolls, and this is what I found. And there's a whole bunch of things. Now, this is assuming that you have a subscription and you got all the, you have all the access to it. But this is coming from Syrinscape. So now what I'm going to be doing is taking this link and adding it to my own custom audio trigger. This is a thing where it says troll. So let's see what it sounds like here. Yeah. Trolls. Yeah, I like that. So what I might do is use that as an opening for this image. So when I open up this image, the sound context is going to come up, and then I can associate that with this encounter. So this comes from the Waterdeep Dragon Heist sound pack, but I'm just going to borrow this for this particular encounter. It doesn't have to go to that sound pack. That's just part of how they organized it in Syrinscape. So if you have access to all the different sounds through the Super Syrinscape subscription, you're able to access this particular sound based off of the search. So I did a search for troll, and that was the first one that came up, and I kind of like it. So when you click on it, it says troll. So I don't know if you guys are able to hear that or not in the audio. I think I have it up loud enough. Yeah, it's kind of there. Let me see if I can do anything to. Maybe that's my system sounds need to be up. Let's try it again, because my volume for myself is lower. Yeah, that's a little better for me. All right, so that's just a thing that you might use for a certain encounter. So to create a custom audio trigger, this is something to do with the context, not with the chat. So the chat window does stuff with combat, certain wording from NPCs and encounters and such. This is going to trigger off of either a story entry or an image in this case. So when I share this image, the context menu will come up here. So I'm going to go to Custom Audio Triggers, which is a group that I made myself. I'm going to actually create Add Item, which is going to add a blank entry. And what I'm going to do is label it as trolls. And then I'm going to take this trigger type and I'm going to change it to content. Because the default is trigger, which will trigger off the chat window. But in this case, I want to trigger from an image or from a story entry. Now, it's not going to automatically play the sound, but it's going to bring up the links. And that's the whole thing with the sound context menu. So I'm going to take this information here, and I'm going to add it to this for this type of record. So now I'm going to take an image, which is the subtype, and I'm going to actually drag and drop this trigger from the sound settings, which is where you search for all your sounds, and drag and drop it into the image links here. So you take the sound itself, you left click and drag it, and it puts it in here. So this is for the sound, but for the image, sorry about that. That's how you did the sound, but for the image itself, you link the image here. So this is an individual sound, and you have this particular sound context menu. So what's going to happen is you have this trigger ready to go. And then what I'm going to do for convenience for myself is I'm going to link the record straight to the image. So if I need to pull that up, it's ready to go. Or you can have the sound context menu open, however you want to do it. So I'm going to close some of this out so you can see what's going on. And then once I have this going, then you should be able to access it. So let me close this stuff out. And we're just going to pretend like we're in the middle of combat. I'm going to bring up the image, and now you can see in the context menu, it's already got the link there. So I can just click that. As soon as this image just comes up, but you have to leave this window open. Now, if you don't want that window open, and you want to do this per individual encounter, you can open that up and just trigger from here. It's the same principle, but with the sound context menu, it's kind of like an overall, like everything at a glance. This one's more specific to this image, and it's linked to this image itself. So whenever you pull up this image, the sound context menu is triggered, and then you also can build your own custom triggers here, which is kind of more of a manual thing, and just trigger it from here. But there's no mechanism that I know of that's going to automatically play the sound when you bring up the image. You still have to hit play. Okay, that's not going to trigger. The only way I know how, maybe, is to set up some sort of NPC or some sort of record that will trigger off of the image name. So you might take this and drag and drop it to the chat window, and it might allow, when you have the word trolls, it might allow for you to trigger a sound. But that's a little bit more roundabout and a little bit more advanced. I don't think I would do that personally, but there might be a way that you can actually take the image name and drop it in here, and it will trigger a sound automatically. But in this case, this is going to give you a little bit more control. Yes, it adds another element or dynamic to your setup, but it is very rewarding when you have all this stuff in place. So that's just a tip there, and like I said, keep those links handy, and if you lose them, you can send them to your players again. Because what I think is happening is a lot of people are redoing the links, and they get off on the session ID. So you might have given them a link in the beginning, and then if you regenerate, it's not necessarily going to be the same campaign. So if you have multiple campaigns that you're running, and you're sharing those campaigns with your players, it can get really messed up if you keep generating new links. So you just want to generate those links when you start your campaign, and save those and keep those. And then you want to manage all of your sounds, if possible, through Fantasy Grounds. You don't have to go to the website very often. The sound is only activated once. I'm not sure what you mean by that. Are you talking about the account activation, or are you talking about the trigger? Because for triggers, it's once, normally. However, some sounds do have variations. So if you are going to click on it multiple times, sometimes it'll have 2 or 3. Yeah, it's only once. Now, what's nice about Syrinscape, though, is even though it's only once, you can click on different ones at the same, or not at the same time, but within the time of each other, and they'll overlap and play with each other. If you don't use Syrinscape and you use like an internal player, it'll only play one sound at a time, regardless. So Syrinscape kind of has a built-in mixer where it kind of fades things in and out automatically for you. But when you use like a VLC player or an internal player, it will only tend to play one particular sound at a time. So there is some limitations on using your own internal sounds, and then you still have to route it to your players. So that's another issue. But if you have the web player version and you have a full subscription, you only have to share this this link here with players, and that's this address up here. You want to save that, and what I'll do is I'll take a copy of that, and then I'll put it into Fantasy Grounds somewhere so I don't lose it. Or I can actually paste it into the chat window, and then the players can actually join from here. But I don't count on my players to preserve that link necessarily. I kind of have to do it to manage my campaign anyway, so that would be something I would do for my notes. So I'd bring up my notes here for the campaign, drag and drop this link into this area so I have it ready to go. And that's the link that I'm going to use. I don't need the master link unless I'm going to manage some sound sets that I've built in Syrinscape itself. Otherwise, I only need this player link. Even though I'm the GM, that's what I use. And I also use that for my OBS. So if you're going to stream, for example, here's this. So I have Syrinscape down here. And when I right-click on this and I go to my sources, let's see if I got this right. So right-click, oh, here it is. So here's the Syrinscape. When I go to the properties here, this is the address that I put in. And that's the same address that I'm using all across the board. So this will allow for it to go to the stream and not have to pipe it directly to anyone. And then when the players have that link, they can hear the audio. Now, when you first start doing that, you got to have this page open and you got to hit start. But then you just minimize this. You don't close it out or you won't hear anything. But that's how I push the audio to my players, is through that player link. When you do it locally, like when you're not using Syrinscape and you're using your computer sounds, you still have to set up the audio to route to Discord or whatever you're using. to share your audio with. So that's a whole nother thing. So it's more convenient to use Syrinscape, but you're going to pay for the, the subscription. It's like $20 every 2 months or something like that. If you don't end up using it, it's probably not worth it. But once you start understanding how it works and you understand how to set up these custom triggers, it's not too bad. It's actually a little bit more convenient than trying to do it all yourself. If you do it with your local sounds, you can still do it. They have it set up in Fantasy Grounds under the settings. So if you go to your sound content and you go to the invite, oops, I didn't want to do that. You go to the settings and you go to file. This is where you can set up your own sound context, but then you also have to set up all the triggers, even the manual ones for the player. So that's why I use the Syrinscape. So that's just kind of a tip. And what I've seen DMs do is they'll forget their session ID, the web player session, and they'll generate a new one, which sometimes it creates a whole new campaign. And if you gave your players an older link, they're no longer going to hear the sounds that you're playing. So you got to be kind of careful with that. And I think that happens quite a bit, especially if you're not certain or sure about it. That can be problematic. So just something to keep in mind. So I'm going to go ahead and move this out of the way, because that's something that you don't really need necessarily unless you're streaming. But these are my little notes that I have for my crib sheet. So when I need to access stuff, especially when I'm building my encounters and such, I kind of want to have everything together. And if you leave Fantasy Grounds up and running when you close out, the location of the windows will stay the same. If you go to Options and you turn on the desktop restore windows on start. So if I close this out now, this is going to bring up what I have open here. So that's pretty handy too. But I also have this crib sheet so that I can kind of get to stuff and hopefully locate it where I'm not going to cover it. Yeah, I don't want to put anything there. So this is where I normally do, is I'll put everything here, and then I got the maps over here, and I got all this stuff over here. So now what I want to do is start setting up the encounter too. So I have kind of something started, already made my own encounter. So if I go to encounters, this is one I made a custom group, and this is called Troll Attack. And there's already 2 trolls in there, but what I had done is created this, and then I just went to my NPCs area, did a search for troll, and then just dragged those over and made 2 instead of just 1. So now they have their own tokens, and these ones in particular have a full body token. That's why I use those. So if I click on that, you have all those different assets. So that's for immersion and for convenience. But you can make your own, but it's just a lot more work because you're building your own tokens and art and everything else. So that's kind of why a lot of people opt to buy the modules. They don't have the time to do all that themselves. All right, so that's part of the setup there is getting the NPCs into the encounter. And the other thing is linking the encounter to the map. So I'm going to go back to the encounter, open this up, and then I'm going to put this so it doesn't cover anything, hopefully. I'll put it down here. Same thing with my notes. Okay, so this troll attack here is going to be linked to the map. So I'll link this here, and then when it comes time to running this encounter, I'll have that ready to go. The other thing I'll do is pre-place these guys. So I'm going to put one guy over here and one of these guys over here. So I'm going to left-click and drag, and that's going to put one of these guys on the map, and then I'm going to put the other guy up here. I'm saying guys, I don't know if they're male or female, but anyway, so these little check marks, that means that they're placed. Yeah, no problem, man. And then that way they're kind of ready to go. Quick question, are you guys getting any feedback like, what do you call it, echo? Because I had that problem the last couple sessions. Anyhow, these are placed. Once you have them on the map, then you're going to close the encounter. It will actually, these will disappear, but they're still placed. So you don't have to worry about it. So go ahead and close that. I'm going to close my crib sheet for now. So when I'm getting ready to run this encounter, this is where I want to be. So I have my sound context menu here, up in this area, so I'll probably put those closer together. And then the encounter itself. So those are things that I do ahead of time before anyone gets to the table. And then when it's actually time to run the encounter, I'll add it to the tracker with this button down here, and that adds this here. Now that I have trolls though in the combat tracker and I have those open, I can almost guarantee you that the sound context menu is going to show trolls. Exactly. Yep. So troll attack, troll battle, troll roar. So we can do a roar if we want. Yeah, that's cool. So this will help keep everything kind of together. So if you've got several context sounds, like I have my custom one, and then I have these that are kind of part of the Syrinscape subscription, you can actually take the sound context menu and link it here. So whenever you have a scene and you want to grab a sound that's not necessarily automatically triggered, it'll be convenient to drag it and drop it into your hotkeys. And then when you need it, you just pop it up, and there's your context menu. So look at this as your soundboard, essentially. That's what this is. And then you go into settings, you can look for sounds that you might want to use and make custom triggers for yourself. And those could be based on images or a story entry or however you want to do it. But in this case, this is just a soundboard that you can use. So here's a troll attack. Let's see what that sounds like. Wow, that's pretty gnarly. So I'm going to turn that down a little bit. So that was a one shot. Yeah, that's pretty loud. Let's try it again. Oops. Troll battle. So that's pretty cool. So you can link this to, whatever action you have going here. But it's not necessary. You don't have to do that. And honestly, it can get distracting. And you can hit stop all, which will stop all of the audio in case you got too much crap going on, or it's covering up your narration, however you want to look at it. But that's essentially what you need to focus on when you're setting up this stuff ahead of time. And it's not always cut and dry and easy. Sometimes this stuff can get very confusing. So start small. You don't need to have everything set. Get build to this. Learn how to use the combat tracker and the NPCs, and then start getting into all this other stuff. So that's kind of the path. Is you want to learn how Fantasy Grounds interfaces with the rule set. Once you learn that and character creation, then you start adding all this other stuff. It just takes time. Most people can't just walk in there and do it unless they've already done it before. So it can be kind of a challenge. Now, the other thing is now that I have these guys on the combat tracker, now I can make them visible by clicking on this eyeball up here. So if it becomes to the point where, they're no longer hidden and they're ambushing players, you can do that. The other thing we can do is have like the player view on. So this is kind of what the players would see. It's nighttime. There's a little bit of filtered moonlight. And when I click on the actual token, that's the view that the actual creature has. So that's another thing is when you are running an encounter, even though you have this selected here, it's not looking through the eyes of that token unless I click on that token. And I think that's confusing, especially if you're new to Fantasy Grounds. So now if I switch to the next actor, which is this arrow here, yes, it moves that, but it doesn't move the vision. So if I click on the vision now on the actual token, it does the vision. Now another thing I don't like is that the map actually moved. So if you want it centered and to stay that way, I'm going to actually right-click and go to View, and then zoom to fit, so it's going to go kind of back where I had it. But I also can go into the settings and turn that off. So this turn auto center map, I can turn that off. So now when I advance the turns, it shouldn't move, it doesn't move the map anymore. And that's annoying if you have it set in a certain place and then it moves on you, you're not aware of that. That's something you want to consider. Now, players can do that for themselves off or on, so it just depends on the situation. So I'm going to go ahead and change the view here. Let's take a look at these guys and see what they look like in the camera view. So now that we have this in a separate kind of way to look at it, let's go to this navigation pane here and just kind of look at some of these, see what this looks like in this 3D mode. So yeah, there's the token here. What's this? Oh, yeah, so here's another thing. The trolls, that when you first put them on the combat tracker, you want to put them over here on the left. So when you have these set like this, they'll always open in the middle. So go ahead and move those over and you know, make them so that they're not going to be in your way, and you always have a spot for them when you get ready to access them. The same thing with this one here. So I just layer, including players, I just layer them all here. So when you're going up and down the combat tracker, you can click on their link here, and that brings it up to the top. So when I go down to troll number 2, and that's going to be this guy way over here. Let me see if I can move him. Yeah, so here's the troll number 2. Not only did I, you know, get his vision because I clicked on the token, but I also can click on this link here on the right, and that brings up a stat block. So that's kind of what makes it a little bit more, I guess ease of use is kind of what I'm getting at. So if you don't want the interface to, you know, you don't want to fight the interface, so I'm kind of working with it. And just by placing windows where you want them to open, and to be a little bit more organized and have a lot less frustration, just place your, you know, your stuff where you want it to go before you start your session. That makes this a hell of a lot easier to deal with than trying to open and close, open and close. I mean, that's kind of what ends up happening in the beginning, right? Because you're not certain what the behavior is like. So the behavior is the first time you open any record. So I haven't opened the items yet. So if I open that record up, it's going to be right in the middle. So you want to move that. So next time I'm going to close the items. So the next time I open it, now it's going to be down here and not in the middle of the screen. And that's kind of an annoying thing that you'll realize when you're running a campaign or even as a player. You got to kind of open the window, place it where you want it, and then when you're done with it, you can close it. If you happen to need to access it again, when you open it up again, it's going to be in the place that you left it. And that's an important thing to know. And that'll save you so many headaches. I mean, there's so many people that get mad at the interface, and I get it. I mean, that's very annoying. But if you know what's going to happen, if you can kind of get a handle on the behavior of the platform, then it's not as bad. It's still a little bit frustrating, but not as annoying as, you know, having that happen every time. So here's the trolls, and this is what I would share with my players. And then, like I said, I have my sound context menu. Trigger that. Troll! So this would be like something we would, you know, basically present and then trigger that audio and then move on to role playing. So that's kind of a cool thing. I like that. And it's nice to have this linked here because now when I need this, I have it over here and I'm ready to go. Now I can actually access that pin and be able to trigger it easier than trying to dig around looking for it. So here's the top-down view now. Here's my links. So these are only visible to the GM, by the way. Those are just there for convenience. That's all it is. So this is kind of a way that you can set up your encounters to be more memorable and be a little bit more organized and less annoying. What is this? Oh, I did a pointer, I guess. So I'll go to pointers and remove it. So this is this is an opportunity also to talk about the torch that I was mentioning earlier. So there's really no good way to handle a torch. But if you were going to, let's say, light a torch, and then you decide you wanted to throw it, or use it as a weapon or whatever. That's not always easy to do in Fantasy Grounds. So if you have a character sheet, you can add the syntax to the back. So you can add your torch. You can have it set up as a weapon. You can also have it set up as a light source. But if you actually want to throw the torch, or maybe you have a light spell or something, you can actually create an asset that is going to act like a token, but assign light to it. So that way, if you want to have the players move around a light spell or something that gives off light, you'll have a way to do it. So the kind of the vanilla way to do it without extensions and all that is to go into your assets, and you want to go to tokens. So not images, but tokens. So your torch icon, or whatever you're going to use to represent the spell or the light, needs to be in tokens. If it's in the asset images area, you can only add that in as a map asset, not as a movable or interactable token. So I'm in the tokens, and I actually happen to have some torches that I added manually. I think there might be a couple in the map packs, but I'm gonna. So there's some, some representations here. So I'll probably either use this one, or I can use this one. So here's a lit torch, and here's another lit torch. So I can use either or of those. So I'll just take this image and link it down to the hotkey. So anything that you need, like spell tokens or anything like that, you can link those down here and use them later. So that way you're not searching for stuff one at a time. You can do all your searches first, drag all your links down, or you can even make a crib sheet or whatever you need to do. But this is a way to kind of make it a little bit more accessible to you. So I'm going to close this, and we close that. And close the sound context menu. I don't need that right now. I don't know what's going on here. There we go. Okay, so basically, I have that torch down here. Then the next step is, once you have your items picked out that you want to use for your lighting assets, is I'm going to go ahead and take the torch and drag and drop it onto the map wherever you want to drop it. So you take this, left click and drag, and drop it. So now when you've selected, it's actually an image that is a token, not a regular asset image. So this is now, you can interact with this. The only thing is there's no light on it yet. So what you do is you go into your map settings, or your, in this case, the image settings, and I'm going to unlock this, and I have this highlighted or selected. It's not on the combat tracker or anything, it's just a token. So what I'm going to do is go to lighting, and then you want to click on token light, and we're going to click on a preset. So this is going to be torch, and then click on add light, and now you have an asset that actually has a torch light. And in order to move it, you have to be in play mode. You can't move that token in any other mode. So normally when you lock the map, it'll default back to play mode. So now if you have a player that lights a torch, he can drop it on the ground, and you can use that as your light. So assuming you have a bunch of humans or people that don't have dark vision, that might be a thing. Or maybe you're going to throw a torch at one of the trolls or whatever. So maybe this area right here, if you drop this, maybe the trolls will be a little less likely to go in this area because they're afraid of fire or something like that. So it's kind of up to you how you want to do it. But that's kind of how I would do this seed, just to have things like that ready to go. And when it's time, you fire that up, you have that ready to go. I have it down here in this area. It could be a spiritual weapon, it could be a light spell, whatever it needs to be. Have that ready to go. And you'll know that by looking at your players' equipment and looking at their spells. Right? You won't always know, but if you look that stuff over before you start your campaign, you'll kind of get an idea of what type of assets you're going to need. You have a player that needs a bunch of spell tokens and stuff, that's a little bit more in depth, but there's an extension that you can get. I think it's called For the Love of Painting. Bane put it together, and it just gives you another spot to drop all of your custom spell tokens and your assets in there. So it's easier to paint, and it's easier to access the tokens. So it's kind of up to you, like how you want that to be. But now, when if I accidentally close these, and then I'm in the combat tracker, you see it selected the troll, but I need to click on the troll to get its vision type, or to be able to see what it sees. And then I need to click on here to bring up the stat block. And now that it's actually located where I want it to go, it's not going to cover anything. And that's kind of an important thing. I teach that quite a bit in these sessions. If you ever watched my older videos, they all kind of talk on that, sort of. I mean, I go through that every time because I know that's a pain point. I know people, I don't say, oh, you're using it wrong. Well, that's may or may not be the case. But when you understand the behavior, it's so much easier to navigate through this stuff. And then over here on the top left on the combat tracker, I can click to this top view. Since these guys are visible, it'll be up here. You can also use this to change turns in the combat tracker instead of using this down arrow. And I usually have my players take the next actor or the turn complete and actually drag and drop that to a hotkey. So that way they can just, very easily have all their shortcuts down below here and just make it quicker and easier to access, especially newer people that aren't certain where things are. You can have them drag and drop shortcuts and stuff down below so they can access it easier. So this is just kind of something you can do to kind of make your encounters more memorable. So one other thing I might do with this image is I might want to put some fog or mist on it. So you got to kind of be careful with how many effects you put on maps. If more than 2 or 3 can get a little bit cagey, depending on your players and how strong their internet and their computer is, so you want to be careful with that. But in this case, I think one effect on the map is not going to break the camel's back. So I'm going to unlock it, and I'm in this view here. So I'm going to go to the effects layer, which is down here. I'm going to add an effects layer on top. And then click on effects, and from the drop down, I'm going to do mist. So that's going to add this mist layer. So first of all, I want to put a mask on it because I don't want the mist to go over the whole background. I just want it over this image. So I'll left click and drag, and that will center it in this area. Now what I'll do is I'll just slightly blur it so that way it's on the edges, it doesn't look so stark. And then what I'll do is turn down the speed. So for this particular effect, you can turn it down the speed. If you go to 50, that's neutral. So if you go to the left or the right, that changes the direction of the mist. So 47 looks pretty good. And then you can change how much mist. I think I just want it kind of more subtle. So if the players have the map zoomed in a little bit, they'll be able to see that. So that's just little things you can do to make the ambiance a lot better. And now finally, I'm going to potentially add a, I would probably reserve this for another show, but I don't think it'll take too long. But it's one of those things where you have to decide, like, is it worth your time, all that kind of stuff. So you gotta have to take it with a grain of salt. But I have a file, an audio file that I had created with, I think it is Suno AI. It's an audio song. Like, I didn't make the song, but I did prompt it, and I actually did the words for it. But, the music part and the sound effects and all that were all made in the Suno AI. So I wanted to make a disclaimer about that. I didn't make the song. But I did, it's my account, a paid account. I did create the image, or not the image, but in this case the audio, and legally I'm able to play it and do whatever I want with it, essentially. As long as you make the disclaimer that it's AI and that you're not trying to sell it commercially, you should be all right. It's not going to kill anything. So I want to, I'm going to take and add my audio to my session here. And this would be a manual thing, right? You'd have to trigger this somehow. And I don't know if I'd want to do that in Fantasy Grounds, because you can do mix and match, you can do local audio and Syrinscape, but you still have to route the audio to your players. In this case, I'll be routing the audio via OBS, so I don't have to worry about, you know, going into Syrinscape unless I have players. Then I have to either direct them to where the audio is coming from, or I have to pipe it through the interface into basically into the from the my personal computer to Discord to the players. So that can be annoying, and that's a whole nother thing that you have to do if you're going to do audio, set up all that stuff. So it kind of depends on how much time and how much effort you're willing to put into it. But I'm going to go ahead and bring that over. I think I'll end the show with that. I wanted to thank you guys for watching, and you know, this is for the community. This is the Fantasy Grounds Academy. We're not officially a part of Smiteworks, but we do work with them, and you know, we support them, and we try to do what we can to make things right. And we don't always know what to do, but we certainly learn what not to do. And a lot of that has to do with experience actually using the platform. And where I think the Academy does well in overall is that we have a lot of dedicated users, and we also have experience with some of the things that can go wrong. And we tend to try to keep those, you know, down as much as possible. We try to keep it to where people can actually play the platform. But anyways, here's a song I made for the trolls.
To tread, look the trolls with hunger never fed, massive forms with eyes that gleam, in the dark they hunt and scheme.